The Cubs were able to acquire Kyle Tucker, but they also missed out on Alex Bregman, Roki Sasaki, and Tanner Scott. So did they have a good offseason? Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Cubs, your daily Chicago Cubs podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Cubs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Sam Olbert. I'm a lifelong fan taking my passion into a discussion with you on all things Cubs. Thanks for being part of the show and making Locked On Cubs your first listen today. And the best way you can help us grow the show is to listen every day, like the video, and leave a comment below. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bet if you win your first $5 bet. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. And welcome in. Happy Friday. I have to start this episode with a little bit of a rant. I'm not angry at anybody. I'm not frustrated with anybody. But I have to get some things off my chest, because what we're going to talk about today is we're going to talk about the Cubs offseason. That's really what the purpose of this show is. But before that, I have to report some Bregman stuff, and I have to report some Jed stuff. And unfortunately, Jed brought up budgeting and payroll. And I don't like talking about that stuff. But as a podcast host, a co-host, our responsibility is to talk about what's prevalent and relevant with the team. And this offseason, unfortunately, payroll and money has been a huge story. And the Cubs themselves have made it that way with the amount that Tom Ricketts has talked about it, and Jed as well. And, the Bregman stuff finally ended yesterday. And I woke up today and I told myself, I want to just say this to start this beautiful program. I'm ready to talk about baseball. I want to talk about going to right center field. I want to talk about two-strike approaches. I want to talk about bullpen usage. I want to talk about navigating schedules. I want to talk about days off. I want to talk about clutch situations. I want to talk about winning baseball games. The offseason has been up and down. There's been some great moments. I am lucky to have a fantastic partner who really covers the day-to-day and is on top of everything. It's not my strength. It's not something I'm great at, because 90% of it is rumors. 90% of it is hearsay. And then we have to report this and report that with the payroll. And, I'm not defending the payroll stuff. I'm not defending the money stuff. I made an episode a month ago solo saying, hey, are the Cubs cutting payroll in 25? It sure seems like it. And it probably is that way. And that's not acceptable. And if you're upset about that, you should be. If you want to move on and not talk about it anymore, that's fine too. I'm just letting you know I report what I have to report. But please believe that after this episode, my mind is shifting to between the third and first base lines, between the left and right field lines, and what this team needs to do to win baseball games. Because whether we like it or not, and whether it's fair or not, if this team's winning baseball games and they're 52-35, 4.5 games up on Milwaukee, nobody's going to be talking about the tax. And they'll probably even spend money anyway to make the team better at the deadline. So now there's things to be frustrated about. There's things to be excited about. But now my mind has shifted to America's pastime, baseball, winning baseball games. But first, we have some things to clean up. So Thursday was a very active day at Cubs spring training. For those that don't know, Alex Bregman signed with the Boston Red Sox a 3-year, $120 million deal on Wednesday night. I believe Chandler Rome of The Athletic was the first on that. It's a tricky deal. It's not $40 million per year on the luxury tax. They did a bunch of deferrals. We'll talk about that later, because Jed talked about the Cubs' stance on deferrals at spring training today. My initial thoughts with Bregman, frustration, not the fact that he's not a Cub, but just how much time was spent on it. Because ultimately, if Matt or I had any inkling that he was going to get this type of contract at that money, even if it's deferred or not, we wouldn't have wasted as much time on it, to be frank. He's getting paid a lot of money, and I like Alex Bregman. I think he would have helped the Cubs a lot. And I think there's certain players, maybe Tanner Scott was one of them. Bryce Harper sure was one of them back, when he was a free agent, that you have to go out of your comfort zone for, and you really have to stretch the budget for. And I just don't think Alex Bregman was that guy, even though Jed did say on Thursday, he was thankful to the Ricketts family for allowing him to have an opportunity to pursue Bregman and stretching the budget. But ultimately, the Cubs offer, in my opinion, cannot be deemed competitive. Bregman signed a 3-year, $120 million deal with Boston with deferred money, as we talked about. The Tigers had a 6-year, I believe, $171.5 million deal there with deferrals as well. And the Cubs, according to Bruce Levine, who corrected an initial report, it wasn't 4 years, 120. The Cubs offered 4 years, 115 with no deferrals. So they were never really even close to getting him. They didn't have any deferrals. They offered 4 years, so they didn't have the long-term deal, and they didn't have the AAV. So it really wasn't that competitive of an offer. And, it is what it is. I'm not at all frustrated that the Cubs didn't land Bregman. I think at that price, I believe he's going to be getting paid, like a premier top 10, 15, 20 guy in the game. Whether you want to count the $40 million as what he's getting paid or what the luxury tax payroll is at 30, whatever it is, he's getting paid a lot. And I just don't think, he helps the Cubs that much. But it is what it is. This is a common theme with the Cubs. They identify a guy they like, they go after him, and they seem to come up short. Whether it's because of years, dollars, or preference. With the Dodgers, it seems to be all three. And we're going to talk about that more in the next segment. I wanted to talk about a couple of things with this and then talk about what Jed had to say, and then we'll move on. So my initial thought was I was very happy to see that the Cubs offered almost $29 million a year, because my mind went to, okay, well, if they offer $29 million a year, that means it's possible. Maybe we can go do a trade or go do something else and figure out a way to supplement this roster, because they still have money to spend. But Bruce Levine asked Jed this, and Jed kind of gave off the impression that it was more of a specialty. And even Matt mentioned this, like it was just kind of a special thing for Alex Bregman, or a special instance with Tanner Scott. They weren't going to just expand the budget just to do it. It was for this specific player. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And then I just want to get into some of these quotes from Jed, because the big thing from his press conference today, or I shouldn't say press conference, his gathering of reporters, he said, quote, "Given where we are at with the budget, I'm glad we were able to pursue it," end quote, talking about Bregman. And there was a lot of other budget talk on there, a lot of other financial stuff. And I was just very surprised to hear Jed talk that much about financials and budget. And, kind of basically when you really want to dissect that quote, he's basically saying, given where we're at financially, I'm just happy we gave it a shot. We're not in a great place. We knew we probably couldn't do it, but we came close. And, let me just put on my conspiracy hat for 1 second here. I don't have a hat on me. I should have. That could have been comical. I think Jed is setting himself up a little bit by saying, hey, the rest of the league, my hands are tied here. We offered Bregman as much as we could. We have some budget stuff going on. If we win 83 games again, it's not my fault. And I think Tom would rightfully come back and say, hey, we're spending a lot more money than Milwaukee, so we should still be better than them, right? And neither one of them are wrong. It's this chicken and the egg thing that quite frankly, I'm tired of trying to dissect and talk about. I was thinking about this so much today, by the way. I went during my lunch hour to get some gas, but I went in the gas station to do it because I wanted a snack and I needed a water bottle to hydrate. And so I just put 30 on pump 11 and drove off without getting gas, because I was constantly just in my head thinking about this show, thinking about what to say, the money this, the money that. This team is just constantly on my mind. I'm tired of it. I just gave away $30 for nothing. When Cubs land, that would be brutal. $30 goes a long way over at Clark and Addison. A couple other just news and notes real quick from the press conference. I mentioned this earlier, but Jed basically, said that the Cubs organization doesn't really philosophically believe in deferred money. They have in the past with like Lester and I think Hayward as well. But that's a big thing because that's the big thing now to get free agents. That's a big reason the Red Sox were able to offer such a tantalizing deal for Bregman because of deferred money. So if Tom's not doing that, that's not a great sign for future free agents. Just want to put that out there. And then here's the most important quote that feeds into what I really want to talk about today. And that is Jed saying, quote, "My expectation now is the group we have is really close to the group we will be going forth with," end quote. Maybe a Justin Turner or some sort of marginal ad, low cost ad. But it seems like for the most part, we know what this Cubs team is going to be, which is great to know. And now the question is, did they have a good offseason? Did they have a successful offseason? Did they do enough to take this division by storm and win it easily? We're going to answer that question coming up next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally, the Bulls haven't had a lot of those lately, or picking a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. We are back here on Locked On Cubs. And as I just said, Jed kind of said that this is kind of the team we're going to roll with. And so to me, that's a signal that, most big moves, probably all the big moves are now ruled out. And this is the team that we have. So it's time to do some reflection. Did the Cubs have a good offseason? I don't know. I don't know. I think that you cannot say they had a bad offseason because they acquired a star player, something that I have been clamoring for years on this program. Now, Kyle Tucker has to be a star, but Jed did his job. I'll say this. I think Jed Hoyer had a really good offseason because he somehow cut payroll by at this point, 20 plus million from last year, which is not his decision. And I do think the Cubs are better than they were last year at this time. Out goes Cody Bellinger. Out goes Isaac Paredes. Out goes Kyle Hendricks. Out goes Hector Neris. Out goes Adbert Alzolay. In comes Kyle Tucker, Matt Shaw to play third, Matthew Boyd to replace Hendricks, Ryan Presley and Ryan Brazier in the bullpen along with Eli Morgan. The bullpen stuff, I don't think I could confidently say they're better because it's the same formula as last year. You had a guy like Alzolay in 23 that was the young, hot name that could be the closer of the future, and then it didn't work out in 24. Same thing with Hodge going into 25. Hopefully it works out better, and then you pair him with the veteran. Last year it was Hector Neris. This year it's Ryan Presley. So it's the same formula. I just think bullpen is a results-based thing. It's like in the NBA when they say it's a make-or-miss league, like just get outs and don't, blow late leads. So we'll see what happens there. But I am confident that the offense is better. Remember, Isaac Paredes might have a good year this year in Houston. He was probably not going to fit really well at Wrigley. They got nothing out of Morel, very small amount out of Paredes. So even though you do have a guy like Matt Shaw at third that's a virtual unknown, his expectations to be better than what was going on last year there is very low. I think Kyle Tucker obviously is the headliner, of course. How much better is he than Cody Bellinger? I think quite a bit at Wrigley Field and what he was projected to be. And I am a fan of Matthew Boyd, especially with what they got out of Hendricks last year. So, there may be some Shota regression, maybe some Tyone regression. I think some positive regression for Nico and Dansby. And I think you could confidently say that this team is better than they were last year. But the Cubs themselves have told you that there's still pieces missing. They went hard after Roki Sasaki, as they should. Every team should have for that financial situation. But they went hard after Tanner Scott. They didn't get him. The Dodgers did. They went hard after Alex Bregman. So as much as we like Matt Shaw, the Cubs wanted Alex Bregman really badly. They didn't get him. And so as much as I believe you could say, hey, you can't say the Cubs had a bad offseason. They added a player like Kyle Tucker to the fold, and they won 83 games last year. They probably should have won a couple of more. By the end of the year, they were eliminated anyway. He's going to make a big difference. You can't say that a bad offseason, but can you really say they had a good one when they identified three major names, Tanner Scott, Roki Sasaki, Alex Bregman, and I think they needed to get one of them, and I think they only could have gotten one of them, and they didn't get any of them. So, where would I land grading the offseason, whatever? I'd still give it probably a B minus, maybe a flat B. I like math. I really think the grade really depends on how much you like Matthew Boyd, because that was their main free agent pickup. They traded for Presley, they traded for Brazier, they traded for Tucker. Carson Kelly, fine, but how much do you like Matthew Boyd? If you're a big fan of him, then you're probably more in the high B range for your grade. I'm a fan of him too. If you don't like that signing, then I don't think you could grade this anything higher than a C plus. I mean, everyone, I think for the most part, is on board with the Kyle Tucker trade. So, and then the other element is the financial part, right? We've talked about it. Jed's talked about it. This is a winning window for the Cubs. This is a competitive window, I think is the phrase that he used. But it's kind of a paradox, or, I don't know what the grammatical phrase is. I'll just say like a paradox, because it's like, well, if you're in a competitive window, why'd you cut payroll? Right? I can't clap my hands and say it's a super successful offseason when we're in a competitive window and we're spending less money this year than we did last year. It's just weird. But I also don't think it's a bad offseason. I wish I had a clear-cut answer for you. I think it was fine. I think they did enough to where we're excited for baseball. Now, I'm not a good example of this. I'd be excited for baseball no matter what, because I love it. It's my favorite thing to do is watch a baseball game in the summertime. But, overall, I think their offseason, if I had to describe it, would be, I think fine's a little bit tough. I think it's a little, it was better than fine. I think the Cubs had a pretty good offseason. I'm going to go with that. Pretty good. You can't call it really good. You can't call it great, because they identified, they told you that they think they're missing pieces. That's why they wanted Bregman. That's why they wanted Scott, and they didn't get them. And so, from that perspective, with the financial cuts, I can't say it was great. It was really good, but I think it was still pretty good because they got Kyle Tucker. They need him to perform. And, I like Matt Shaw more than most people. PCA, there's a good mix of young players and excitement. I personally am worried about the starting pitching. I just wish we had another arm. I wish we had another reliable starting arm that we could just stick right between Steele and Imanaga, and that would have been perfect for me. And like I said in the first segment, I was the guy that was like, man, I wish the $28 million they could have got to Bregman, why couldn't they just give that to Nathan Eovaldi or Flaherty or Buehler? But it sounds like this Bregman was a specialty case. Hey, he's available. It's early February. Can we expand the budget? And Jed mentioned how they expanded the budget for Bellinger last year, which I didn't even really know. But overall, I think the Cubs had a pretty good offseason. I still think that they are favorites to win the Central, but I'll be honest with you, because that's what I do. I have a very similar feeling going into this season as I did last. I thought the Cubs were probably the favorites last year, slightly. Vegas and Pacoda and these, projection systems like them more this year than last year, and they have Tucker versus Bellinger, so I feel a little bit better. But I'm not. I really wanted to be confident. I really wanted to come out here and go, this division's ours. It's wrapped up. We're going to win 90 plus. Let's rock and roll. And that wasn't accomplished. But I also said, I really want a star player, and, that was accomplished. So kudos to Jed. He obviously is dealing with a lot and a lot of restrictions and things like that. I think the Cubs got better. I'm really excited, for the season. I'm really excited to watch Kyle Tucker in a Cubs uniform. And it's definitely been a very eventful offseason, unlike last year. So we have that going for us. Coming up next, we're going to talk about the best and worst of the week. We're going to have some fun. We are back here on Locked On Cubs, and I have some kind of Cubs, but non-Cubs, best and worst of the week. I want to start with the Chicagoland weather for my worst. Folks, I've lived in this city for my whole life, basically. we get some bad weather and we should know how to handle it. On Wednesday in the Chicagoland area, Matt came on Sunday before we recorded and was like, I think we're going to have a snow day Wednesday. And I was like, what? It doesn't even look like it's going to be that bad. And then I work with school districts too. And on Tuesday, I got a bunch of texts. Hey, classes are canceled. Schools are getting canceled for Wednesday. It's going to be really bad, whatever. I woke up at 7:30 a.m. on Wednesday, no snow. 8:30, 9:30, 10:30, no snow. It didn't start snowing in the Chicagoland area till like 11:30 noon. And it didn't really pick up. I actually went out Wednesday night, late Wednesday night. It started to snow pretty good and the roads weren't great, but schools don't start at 7:30 p.m. It was a really light day. And going into it, I thought it was going to be a real blizzard, a real snowstorm. Let's be better. What? This is Chicago. That would have been a snow day if you lived in out west or down south where you never see snow. That was nothing. If I had a snow day like that when I was a kid, I would have got the fellas together. We would have played a football game or something outside. If it was 5-10 degrees warmer, I probably would have went out for a jog. I mean, it was a pleasant day just with a little bit of snow. I mean, goodness gracious. My best of the week, and this is kind of Cubs related. You guys have heard me talk about on this show how I always laugh at the PR moves of teams and how every team has these public relation sort of just news drops. In the business, they call it the Friday news dump. And the Cubs have done it plenty of times. My favorite example was in 2023. It wasn't on a Friday, but in 2023, if you remember, the Cubs in May had that rough trip on the East Coast. They lost to, I think they got swept in Miami. They went to Washington. They lost 3 out of 4. And when they were losing the finale of that game, somebody hit a home run for the Nats. And like 5 minutes later, somebody posted, hey, the Cubs are calling up Matt Mervis. And everyone got all excited and forgot about the game. And I always just, Matt and I always talk about this, and I could be wrong, but I'm like, well, of course they waited till a time where things were bad. Now, hey, let's focus on Matt Mervis. On Sunday night, probably the funniest PR moment that I've seen was after the Eagles won the Super Bowl. And I mean, it must have been within the hour, maybe even before, because the game was decided so far in advance. The Sixers let an article go about how Joel Embiid might need surgery. He may never be healthy again. He shouldn't have played in the Olympics. I got the notification to read this article on ESPN, and I'm reading it because I didn't have a whole lot of interest in the Super Bowl. And I'm thinking to myself, this is one of the funniest things as the Eagles fans nobody's even near a computer. They're all out celebrating. They just won their second Super Bowl in, modern times. And it was an unbelievable performance. The same city and their biggest star outside of probably Saquon Barkley and now maybe Hurts, they just let out that he was injured and nobody probably even read it. And then the Mavs did the same thing during the Super Bowl with Anthony Davis. They were like, yeah, he's going to be out a month after that trade. They released it during the Super Bowl because, nobody reads it. And I just, I'm a media nerd, and I just find that stuff really funny when they do these news dumps. And it's like, you're literally waited till people were distracted to post this because you don't want people to read it. It makes me laugh. But anyways, just wanted to lighten up the best and worst a little bit this week because I know that this show was a big one and a lot. Look, I'll close the show by saying this. I really believe that this Cubs team can be really, really good. If I had to do a ceiling floor wins, I think they could win 92, 93 games with their ceiling. I think their floor is probably low 80s, right? So they're right there in the middle again. They have to figure out a way to avoid being an 83, 84, 85 win team. Now, I do think there's a little bit of a case to be made, and Matt and I will talk about this, that maybe what we're used to in the NL for wins, it might be a few wins less because it's so consolidated and there's so many really good teams that maybe this year 87 is your 90. Do you know what I mean? But, they have to find a way to make the playoffs. Before all this news dropped today, my episode was going to be about how it's a make or break year for Jed Hoyer. and a must win, a must playoff season for Jed Hoyer for obvious reasons. He's in a lame duck year and he has to win. I did an episode about 3 months ago before the Kyle Tucker trade saying that it might not be that for Jed if he could develop some young guys. But the second that you traded for Kyle Tucker and you have 1 year with him, you have to make the playoffs this year. And I'm really excited to talk baseball. I'm really excited to, talk about the ways the Cubs can do this, because they still can, absolutely. But you have the right to be frustrated and annoyed that, Bregman, Scott, Sasaki, they came in second for different reasons each time. And this whole offseason, they've talked about payroll and Jeff Passan's taking shots, Ken Rosenthal's taking shots. And, you don't want your team to be talked about like that. But at the end of the day, the game gets decided between the lines. And, I can't wait to get back between the lines and talk about winning baseball games, because that's my favorite thing. Thank you so much for checking out this edition of Locked On Cubs. You give us 20 to 30 minutes and we'll give you all things Cubs with a laugh or two along the way. Be sure to hit subscribe on YouTube, smash the like button for the algorithm, and leave a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, and everywhere you get your podcasts. I'm Sam Olber, and this is Locked On Cubs. Let's see if I could do this. Take us home, Parker. Take us home.